It's Jeremy from Jeremy.net. I am a comic book artist, writer, creator, and I share my creative process here with you on the internet. If you would like to support this channel, become become a member of my Patreon. You can get comic book pages and see artwork before anyone else. You get an additional bonus live stream. We've been doing the art book study group on the Patreon channel. And if you would like to see the best of my social media posts throughout the month, get them all delivered to your inbox, and replays of these live streams, you can go to newsletter.jeremy.net, sign up for my newsletter. And if you'd like to check out physical copies of my comics, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. That will take you to my Amazon author page. And tonight, changing the schedule up, we got a midweek live stream with my guest, Peter Palmiotti, veteran comic book inker, creator, indie creator, and currently working on his project Retro. So Peter, welcome. It's been a long time since we had a chance to catch up.
That's true. Thanks for having me, Jeremy. This is great. Great to be here and definitely catch up. And hello, everybody.
I'm realizing now as we're on that I have it set up. I'm trying to figure out how to set this up so that I can have your page up inking while I can have my, because I am stream, like right now it's set for my main camera. And I'm trying to figure out how to set it up so that it will have your page and then my drawing table. I should have probably set up with my drawing table on first. But let's see here what happens. If there's any of these formats that will allow me to have both of our pages up. I don't know if there's a way that'll let us have both of our pages up, but we'll just watch you ink for a little bit, and then, after I switch through, I will, we'll draw for a little bit. I'll switch it back to my camera. I'll switch it back to your camera. We'll do it like that. So.
Okay.
Well, first off, you've been working on Retro for a little while. Why don't you tell my audience a little bit about the background of your comic, kind of the elevator pitch, and what the current progress is, because you're working on it right now.
Yeah. Retro is a character I created way back when, in my late teens, so over 30 years ago. And a friend of mine and myself were out venturing in the woods upstate, and we decided just to come up with our own superheroes, because we're both comic fans, and he came up with his, which was a character called Mineral Man. It's kind of funny. And then I came up with Retro. It was essentially just a name initially, and I went home at some point and drew the character and came up with a costume and a look. I was very much thinking sort of 80s rock bands with the long hair, and very influenced by Captain America and Daredevil, sort of like street heroes, and he's a little stronger than your average person. He's a little faster than the average person. Other than that, his sort of superpower is he's a master of parkour.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's like, that's pretty much integrated with a lot of superheroes, but I thought I'd put a little spotlight on that aspect of him. So since then, I've been sort of thinking of the character in my mind and building on him and building on his world. And it was around 2009, because, as you know, like I worked for Marvel and DC back in the day. I've mostly been an inker in the industry since 1991. But I've been leaning more and more towards independent comics, and I eventually was like, I really want to do my own comic, and I thought retro would be the excellent starting point. So yeah, 2009, I found my initial artist. That didn't work out. He did a couple pages. He went on to become a pinup artist. But I found my friend Rick Future and asked him if he wanted to pencil the first issue, and he agreed. Yeah, he penciled most of the issue. He penciled 20 pages. Then it was only recently that he finished penciling it. So the last 8 pages sort of have a different style. But I'm inking the whole book. You know, I created the character. I'm writing it. I got my friend Marshall Lee going to be coloring it.
That's
I
nice.
got other
Awesome.
friends. Yeah, I got other friends that will be lettering, and then somebody will help me out on production. But yeah, I should be finished inking and you know, everything before the end of the year, and get it printed up. I had a campaign for it last year, but that was strictly for initial funding. So that was a Kickstarter for 5 days. Got like just over 80 people to pledge, and I'll be getting it into their hands. And depending on timing, I will be doing a Indiegogo full-fledged campaign afterwards. So I'm really excited. You know, it's essentially the character is very influenced by comics I've read. You know, I read comics from like the 60s into the 90s. So all that, and combined with, you know, heavy metal was a big influence for me. And it's going to be a mature book, so it's a little modern sensibilities thrown in. It won't be heavy like blood or heavy nudity, but there will be a little of both along the way. Yeah, I built up a bunch of characters he interacts with as a hero, and then in his personal life, he has a girlfriend and other people he knows, and there's a little of that in the first issue, and I'll just keep expanding. And anybody who knows me knows, like, my brother Jimmy Palmiotti. He's also in the industry. You might know his work. He's currently strictly a writer, but he was an inker back in the days. He inked everything. He's going to be the villain of the second issue.
Keeping it in the family.
Yeah, it's my payback, because back in the day he hasn't penciled a lot. Mostly he's done like some pinup work, some sketches, sketch covers, and sketch cards and whatnot. But he did pencil a in what was it, Marvel Comics Premiere, or like
Or
that,
presents
where it was
the,
like
the 4-issue one.
Marvel, yeah. Marvel Comics Presents. There was like 3 stories in it each issue. He did a Ghost Rider story, and he used me as like a background character. Like, he took a bunch of photos of me, and the background character was a bum. So I was like, I'm going to pay you back one day. So the you know, like, the villain for the second issue is this guy called Button Man. So Jimmy's going to be Button Man.
You're like, you just wait. It's like, you're not going to see it coming, but I'll get there with the vengeance. That's awesome. You know, and I'll tell you, I genuinely envy you having, you know, a brother who's not just creative but in the industry. Because when I grew up, I have 2 older brothers, and I'm the only one who has an interest in like writing and drawing and creativity. So I love my brothers. They're cool. They're cool folks. But to grow up with somebody who has that same passion, and you can share and geek out over all the same cool stuff, and you're turning him on to cool things you find. He's turning you on to cool things he finds. Like I genuinely envy that.
Yeah, I mean, we grew up in loving comics, loving movies, and all that. I was lucky enough to go visit my family back in January before all this craziness.
Mm-hmm.
I was staying at his place, and I spent most of my time with him alone. I got to meet my other brothers and their wives, and at a dinner. But mostly, I was hanging out with Jimmy. Amanda was busy. Amanda Connor, for those that don't know, is his wife, and she was busy on a deadline. So I hung out with her a little bit, but mostly Jimmy. We're just catching up, and he took me. It's funny. He took me to his local comic shop, and he posted a video on his Instagram. If anybody wants to go check it out to see exactly what I saw, but essentially, it's a really nice comic shop in Florida, and it's a pretty big place, and they have a little bit of everything, including a ton of new books. And not just Marvel and DC. They are selective, but they have a wide range of books. And then he took me to a back room, and this was a little surprise for me. He has a back room in his local comic shop that is exclusively for him to store his Kickstarter books.
Oh, nice! I thought you were going to say it's like a little comic book speakeasy. But store space is even better, because I have definitely I have filled up a room in my home with a print run of graphic novels that took me 5 years to ship. So I have learned that's one of the things that led me to start shifting towards print on demand, because I'm like I can't just keep filling up my house with books. Which friend of the indie game. Like that's the hard part, is like making is the first hard part. Then moving them, that's when the real challenge sets in. And you're just looking at them every day, like,
yeah. It's like maybe I should put my bed on top of the books.
Well, I was lucky that my old apartment that I lived in had a Well, actually, it was nice. Both one apartment had a walk-in closet, so I was able to store the books in there. And then when I moved, fortunately, the new place I had a crawl space with storage underneath it, so I could just put. At that point, I'd moved like half of the print run, so I was able to fit the other half into that crawl space, and then just slowly move them over a few years, convention-wise.
Yeah.
But there was some stuff, because I popped in on your live stream on your channel, which, by the way, for anyone who pops in and is watching, there's links to Peter's YouTube channel, which he streams on regularly, and I know you're trying to get on there daily these days, which is incredibly impressive. But also a link to Peter's Twitter, so you can follow him. Both see his daily grind on both platforms. But one of the things that you were talking about was just in terms of the pace that you were trying to set to get this book, kind of like you went through here, trying to get it out before the end of the year. I have been going through kind of a weird, I don't want to call it a catharsis. I don't want to call it a come to Jesus moment, because it definitely does not feel like coming to Jesus. It's more of me trying to figure out the most productive way for me to continue to make comics going forward. Because
right.
For me, the big thing is that I'm not sick of it. I'm not burnt out. I love making comics. But it's taken me 8 years to finish this the series I'm working on now. So there was a point where I was doing a couple of issues a year, like 2.5 issues a year. But if you look at how I've slowed down in the back half, it averages out to about an issue a year. So I've just been thinking about, this series I've been trying to improve with each issue. You know, that the way we always do. We're always trying to step up our game.
Right.
Like every single page you learn, you try to take every little thing you learn new and apply that to the next page. Like if you get like 0.5% better with each page, you know, by the end of an issue, you're 12% better. So if you just add that by continuing to work, you're gonna keep getting better. Like I've heard I've heard Brad Geiger on the Comic Lag podcast say you can't get worse at something you do every day. So I love that quote. But I've been trying to figure out, like, once I finish up this issue, because I'm actually working on the last issue of an 8-issue series right now. And I think once I finish this, I'm going to do two things. One is I'm going to start working on, as opposed to making each page better, I'm going to work on making each page faster. So I'm going to start looking at really stripping down my style and coming out sort of an Alex Toth kind of an Alex Toth, Steve Canyon type, like a Milton Caniff working faster and simpler. And that's kind of a misnomer, because I just read Milton Caniff work for the first time like a month ago. Obviously I knew his name and his reputation, but I never read any of his work. And once I was reading it, I was like, how is he producing work this great that quickly? I mean, it doesn't hurt that his art assistant and background artist was Norman Rockwell's nephew, but still though, but I'm sort of going through an interesting evolution myself, in that the next project I want to start making even just short. I always keep telling myself I'm going to do short stories, but I want to just try and do stuff that are like one shots, or like, just 48-page stories that just some fall together, working in a quicker, more stripped down style. But also I've realized that even if I simplify my style like that, the thing you mentioned about the artist that you had originally working on the series switching to becoming a pinup artist, right. I realized that in terms of the revenue side, because it's not necessarily that anyone gets into this for the money, but I feel like the possibility to have control over eventually doing my own thing full time comes from being able to generate revenue from it. And I was thinking to myself, well, I can't necessarily do a pinup. I wouldn't say that there's a 1-to-1 between the time it takes to do a comic book page versus the time it takes to do a pinup, because with a comic book page, you're not trying to necessarily make every single line or make the single image perfect. So whereas a pinup is just one image, you're putting more effort, more energy into that single image. So I've been thinking about, after finishing this series, looking at doing pinups, but doing them not necessarily, maybe a little bit of fan art, but mostly trying to do just standalone images of what future concepts I want to do as comics. And then, doing them so that they're single images to do as a print. But if I can do that and say, well, this is an idea that I would eventually use it to test market potential covers.
Right.
Put it out there and see if there's prints of images that people actually buy. And if they're buying it and they like the imagery, I'm like, okay, if I do like maybe a series of like 12 prints, and out of the 12, there's like 4 different potential comic books out of there, like 4 different sets of characters. And I see which ones are the ones that actually people respond to, maybe, that people are even willing to spend money on, even if there's no actual comic book attached to them. I'm like, well, maybe this is the one I should focus on for the comic. And then kind of split my time between doing imagery like that and then doing a more comic strip style pacing for whatever I do choose. Because I think for a good long while, I'm still going to be just doing, pages in my my off hours here and there, catch as catch can. I mean, I consider myself fortunate to still have a day job, given what's going on with the pandemic and the economy. So I definitely am appreciative of that. But I know that it means that the amount of time I'm going to be able to put towards finishing comic book pages is still going to be pretty limited for the foreseeable future.
Right.
So
Yeah, it's something that a lot of creators, mostly artists, talk about. Like anybody doing their own books, it's like, yeah, it's taking me too long, too long, too long. You hear it everywhere. Um, and you could break it down like sort of science. I mean, comic art is what comic art is because we're not spending a year on a page, because we're spending a certain amount of time and then moving on to the next page. And it's a difficult challenge, and I'm already thinking of the big picture of where I want to go, which is bigger than just doing one book. It's doing multiple books. um, and while I'll have other artists involved, I still gotta pick up the pace if I'm ever gonna do this before I'm 100 years old. um, but yeah, so um, it's and I was talking a little bit about this myself, like um, yes, I expect to make some money on the comics, but I need a revenue stream as well, to keep me floating. Um, Meanwhile, I don't know if you heard my news, but I just signed a contract to write a trilogy novel for somebody, and that is going to bring me an advance. And once that comes in, then I'll be able to like not be so distracted by a lot of things and be more focused on my path ahead, and just plow ahead with the comic work I want to do, and get a lot done, and not take on as much commission work, or odds and ends inking gigs for other people. So that would be my way, because like I'm in a spot where, yeah, I can go out and get a day job, even like seasonal, temporary, and that will definitely help. Because right now I don't know when the money is coming in, but once it does, I'll be in a much better position. But yeah, it is a challenge to, like, I work from home in DC, and working for somebody pushes you harder to really just like go for it and get work done. Working for yourself is a lot harder. It's not, I don't know, it's not motivation per se. It's like I'm always motivated. It's like I do want to get it done. But I think sometimes I don't work at full steam, to really, get cracking and get pages done and get things moving. Because
I think it might also just be the desire to make each page as good as it can be, as opposed to when you're on deadline. You don't have to, when you're doing your own book, you don't necessarily have to make that what feels like a sacrifice.
Yeah.
So, and before you go on, I was just gonna say I didn't catch the part of your stream where you were talking about the book project. I just wanted to say congratulations, because I think that's awesome. So,
thanks.
Anytime you get a new, we gotta celebrate each other's wins and opportunities. So congratulations on that. I'm glad to hear it.
Yeah. And it's not like a big book publisher. It's just like this kid who has a dream, and I'll be a part of fulfilling that. But like writing a novel is something I've always wanted to do.
So this is prose?
Yeah, this is prose.
Nice.
Initially it was going to be like he was talking about doing a comic, and it's a little different than just like sitting down and writing a novel based on what you you love and want to write about. It's he had an initial character, and he sort of has a semblance of a world in mind. So he gave me essentially a rough outline for the first arc, and wants me to write based off of that. So it's a little challenging, but it's also a little bit already set up at the same time. And what I did was I wrote a little more than I usually do. Like when I write a comic plot for myself, it's very loose. But so I wrote the first issue of his character and story as a comic, and he was overly impressed with that, and that's when he started talking about doing it in novel form. And I was like, yeah, I could go for that, especially if I'm going to get some kind of an advance, and I don't have to sweat life for a while. I could just create every day. That would be the ultimate. So it's a long time coming, but we're at least at the next step.
Oh yeah, 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 and that's something interesting. When I look at people that are running successful crowdfunding campaigns, I do see that a lot of it tends to be writers who are putting together the staff, because the advantage. I genuinely don't think that writing is easier. It's just less time consuming. I think that the mental effort that you're putting out is the same as the mental effort when you're drawing, but it's that mental effort is sustained for a much longer period of time when you're actually drawing a comic book page, as opposed to writing a comic. And that leads me to think the opportunity. I think it's smart to take opportunities like that, and the only reason why I haven't necessarily explored more of that, like I've talked to some friends who say, well, I if I'm a decent writer, that maybe I should look at hiring a staff and hiring a team, maybe even just going the Keith Geffen style, where I'm doing loose breakdowns and writing it, and then let somebody else do the finished art. Right. The problem with that is that the making the actual art, both the penciling and the inking, that's kind of what I show up for. I kind of write so that I have something to draw, and I tend to write for myself as opposed to trying to freelance stuff, because I want to have more control over my own work. But that said, I don't know. I can't really speak until I try it, because I've only written for another comic book artist like once or twice, like other projects. I couldn't really speak to it for sure until I'd done more of it, but I do feel, for me, I would have a hard time if all I did was write for other people and didn't, touch the brush anymore. I got to keep my hands on the brush.
Yeah. Art is a skill you got to keep at. So, the writing you can spend a little time on and get a lot done. The art you spend a lot of time on and you get a little done. But I'm thinking, like, I'll be penciling my book, this retro, with the second issue on, because my second artist for this book has gone on to oil painting and doing all that. And I don't mind. It's kind of like, I was probably meant to be doing this book.
That's the universe clearing other people out of the way and saying, nah, we're moving you to the front of the line. You can't dodge this one.
Yeah. So, it's like, as an artist, I have still a lot to learn, but I think at least, the fundamentals are there. And, I know personally, like, I like following artists who develop along the way. So I don't think other people will mind as much either. And yeah, it's just a matter of really knuckling down and doing an issue within a sort of set period of time, so you're not taking a full year on a book. Because while I'll have other books, I want at least Retro to come out a couple of times a year. At least twice, preferably, more than that. But building a small publishing company at the same time, it's like, if I could get out 2 issues a year, that would be good speed. But that will mean a lot of changes in my life. I was even thinking before I came on, like maybe I should just, beginning of next year, if things work out in such a way, like take January, February, March, and not really be online, not really post that much, maybe stream on YouTube and that's it. Check messages and that's it. But just really focus on building the business end of it and working on Retro and the other books. I think my time would be much more valuable and productive if I did that. And it's like all creators feel it's a necessary evil to be online, and there's some truth in that, but you don't have to be everywhere.
That's true. I have like six different platforms I'm on. I don't know if that includes Patreon or if that's in addition to Patreon. And I've kind of got it streamlined now where it's like once a day I just go through, I take whatever images I have in my queue. Basically, I make something, I put it in a folder, and I forget about it. I open a different folder from stuff months ago or weeks ago, and I open that folder, post stuff online. So it's like I'm constantly refilling my refilling the hopper, creating that posting buffer. But you know what though? Speaking of, first off, yeah, I do agree with you in terms of like you can't necessarily be everywhere. It's just one of those things where I found that other than YouTube, which seems to be getting the most, YouTube and my Patreon is where I'm getting the most interaction. But other than that, all of the other platforms, it's like it's a little bit here, a little bit there, and I've had weird stuff. Like there was a point where I considered just not posting to Pinterest ever again. Like I had been on Pinterest, like seriously, probably almost a decade, and posting pretty regularly, and got very little out of it. And then just over the past year, and I can't really understand what changed, but I just started getting tons of like people following stuff, saving stuff to boards, and getting these messages about how things. It's not like I'm blowing up. Like I've got thousands and thousands of followers. And that's what's also interesting is that whole thing about people say, well, you can't pay the rent with likes.
Right.
But it is interesting that I'm getting more people interacting with my work on a platform that I was on for several years, and I don't feel like I did anything different to warrant people watching it now. But it's one of those things where I'm just like, it made sense for me to continue it. And I can't always tell why, you can't really tell when a platform's going to blow up or when stuff is going to happen for you. So it's like, I'm not going to get on TikTok. At a certain point, I'm like, all right, I've had enough. If I come back, I may eat my words a year from now if everyone in comics is on TikTok. There's times when on YouTube, I like being on YouTube. I look at how many comic creators are on Twitch instead. And I think what's kept me from switching over to Twitch is that I've already got an audience on YouTube that seems fairly engaged. Not to like the level of YouTubers who are making a full-time living off of it. But it's like the audience that I have here, I don't want to bail on them. Because I've had a lot of people that have, reached out, just sent messages saying that certain videos I posted have really helped them creatively, or they just enjoy hearing me talk. Or, I try to keep things on the positive because making art is really, really hard. So generally when I'm talking about how I'm getting through the difficult struggles, and here's ways to keep your chin up, keep your head up, and keep going. I try not to gripe or when I do gripe, I try to make it sound more like a twisted ankle as opposed to a broken neck. So, but yeah, that social media will eat up some time. The other thing that I've been thinking about, and this because we're not too far apart in age. So I've been thinking a lot about conventions, and yes, there's no conventions happening right now because of quarantine, and yeah, there's no telling how soon things are going to go back to normal or if they'll ever go back to normal. And even in the past, you would still get con cred every time you went to a show. But
yeah.
it's a two-part question I got for you. Because the first question is just how much prior to the pandemic did attending conventions play into your creative life? And then the second part of that is more just some kind of an open-ended, what do you think about this? In that, I also see some folks have dropped in the chat. I'm going to give them a quick shout out. I saw Vince Moore, who's going to be on this Sunday. He popped in to say hi. So what's up, Vince? And I see my buddy Jesse Toves and John Ersick are here. Thanks for popping in, guys. Okay, so the first question is just conventions. How much of a big part were they in your creative life? The second one is growing up, getting a mainstream creator to show up at a convention, like in the late 80s, early 90s, when you had your local con, wherever you are in the country, when you've got your local hotel show, or maybe you've got like a show at the fairgrounds, your local one, if it's a bigger show, getting a mainstream artist to show up those was a big deal. Because for the most part, creators are on their deadlines. And yeah, that's still true now, but it used to be like, yeah, you might only have one or two big names that might show up at that small local con, and sometimes they'd have to cancel because they're just like, I'm sorry, I'm working on a book, I'm up against the wall, I can't do it. And in the current landscape, we're fortunate that so many comic creators are able to make it to shows, and because they're making good money on that convention circuit. But I've been wondering whether part of my problem in terms of moving my work to the next level is that I was trying to do... I originally was trying to do a show a month while working a day job. That almost killed me. I dropped it down to 6 shows a month. 6 shows a year. And that was tough but doable. But then I found after about 2 or 3 years of doing that, I was getting diminishing returns from shows I had been to multiple years, and occasionally I would try to work in a new show just to see if there's opportunities at new shows. And what my personal experience and what I believe, anecdotally, I don't have hard numbers, but I believe that what was hurting me was that I was not putting out new content frequently enough. And this is a really rambly way of asking, do you think that sometimes going to conventions when you're an indie creator, you're putting the cart before the horse, in that if you're not putting out something on some sort of schedule, bi-monthly, quarterly, twice a year, if you're not sticking to that, then maybe it's not that important to chase the conventions, and maybe you should just stick to, I gotta finish the books, because that's the real way to build the audience. That's stuff I've been thinking about a lot over the past year, even before the convention. So,
yeah, conventions were never my number one go-to. I've been to a lot of them. I've been to a lot in New York because that's where I'm from. I'm living out in Kentucky now. Boston, Philadelphia, all that area. Bunch of random ones, but I did go to Chicago. I did go to San Diego. And my experience is that, 50-50, I've made decent money at conventions. And usually I only wanted to go when I had something new out, which is more than just like one new book, a couple of things under my belt to present. and I'm not like a major player when it comes to cons, and sort of like I've always had an insider look at things, and I know a lot of artists who you see at all the cons. I would hear the stories. Oh, that guy's late with his book, and he's going to this con, or that other guy, he's missing deadlines because he's busy hitting all the cons, and like, so I was always worried about like going to too many cons because I'm not fast, and I don't need the extra speak about me behind my back. Oh, he's going too many cons. He's not doing his book. You know, I actually wanted to go to a couple this year. I wanted to go to Heroes for the first time, Heroes Con, and I was going to table with a friend of mine. We got the table. We were going to go, and then we were listening to hear if it was happening, and then it was pretty much that month. Like, I think it was June, and they finally said that it wasn't happening, which I expected.
Yeah.
But I did plan, like I said, okay, I'm committed to Heroes. I'm going to 2 other major conventions, not to table, but to network. And I was committing to that early this year. And I was going to go to San Diego, and I was going to go to New York, and then the pandemic hit, and I was like, I'm not doing nothing this year, apparently.
Yeah, universe said no.
Yeah. I believe they're important. It's my opinion changes. It's like you can exist without going to conventions. But I would say in recent years, I've learned more about going to a con and getting the most out of it. So I think it's more worthwhile to go. But overcommitting yourself on anything leads to disaster of getting work done. So it's like anything. It's balance, and it's hard to say what's going to get you the next milestone, the next 1,000 fans. But really, like I grew up in a time before the internet, and I would be utterly happy to be offline and let somebody else handle everything.
Well, I was gonna say it's funny because just seeing how comfortable you are, just having people sitting over your shoulder and talking to you while you're inking and working, I feel like this is way less stressful and honestly way more pleasant than being at a convention table. Because like I at a certain point stopped doing commissions at shows, even though it's a great revenue resource, because I just felt like I couldn't do my best work. And that whole thing where you never want to talk down a piece you did to the fans because they're happy with it and they pay good money for it. You don't want them to say, nah. But when I am sitting there, I think maybe I could count the number of convention sketches I've done at a convention that I was happy with on one hand.
Yeah.
But when I'm sitting here at my drawing table, I'm like just relaxed and I'm taking my time. There's not that whole part of it's just that pressure of get the convention sketch done by the end of the day or get the sketch done by the time you think the person's coming back to. Whereas if I'm just at my table working, it's finished when it's finished. I pack it up and drop it in the mail. But if I have the person who actually purchased the commission hang out and talking with me, great. If I just have other artists hang out, my friends, like, hanging out and talking, that's great. If I just got other comic creators or comic fans or creative like art students hanging out, I'm like, that's great. I really enjoy that. I think almost as much as being at the table. Like nothing really can replace the face-to-face time.
Yeah.
But this actually, what we're doing right now, feels pretty close on my end, because the other thing is when I'm doing shows, the thing you mentioned about going there for networking, you really can't discount the networking factor. If you're trying to get work from a particular publisher or meet just as many editors and publishers as possible to try and line up work for the coming year, that's invaluable in terms of being at a convention. But for me, somebody who's mostly focused on creating and selling their own work, when I went to conventions, I would rarely leave my table. I'm just there the whole time, just trying to move books, give people my pitch, maybe give it to some podcast interviews just to get my work in front of people. And that means that the thing like about doing commission sketches, or even, anytime, I can't just have my head down drawing, because I'm constantly looking up to see who's going by, not in terms of like, oh, I got a network, but just see who's going by, because I want to like put a postcard in their hand, ask them if they've heard about my book, ask them if they, I'm not the carnival barker guy in the aisle yelling, but when people walk by, I'm the guy who makes eye contact with everyone who goes by. I say hello to everyone. If they smile or they're looking at stuff at the table, I invite them. Hey, would you like to take a look at my comics? Would you like to take a look at my prints? That's all. But even that is real hard to do if you're also trying to draw a commission or just sketching or whatever. Like, I used to have the mindset of, and I think that this is true for big name creators, where if somebody is doing, if Travis Ture or Eric Canetti are sketching at their table, people will walk by and they'll stop just to see what he's working on, whether they're buying something or not. And then maybe they'll see, while they're there, they'll see a sketchbook, like, oh, well, let me pick up a sketchbook, But for indie creators, I don't think that whole, like, if you've got a piece going, people will stop to see what you're doing. I don't think that works as much for indie creators.
I look at it this way. It's like, if I want to buy a car, I buy the best one made. I don't drive. I'm just using this as an example, but it's like, I don't want to see it made. I want to buy from a company that makes a damn good car, and it's like that with art. I don't want to necessarily get a sketch at a convention, because that's not their best work. I have, and it's there is fun to that, but I look at it differently because of a lot of information I've soaked in over recent years, and the con environment isn't conducive to doing great works of art. You got people banging into your table. You're trying to make a buck or talk to people. If you can, if it's not disruptive to you doing decent pieces, then you can do them at a con. But I know people completely like distracted by con environment to do anything decent. So as I've been a fan at conventions. If I'm meeting them, if I just see a familiar name and see their face, I'm totally happy. It's like, oh, it is Jim Stalin, it is Jim Stranko, it is whoever. So I know a lot of artists that do commissions and deliver them at cons, but either they're taking the commission work ahead of time and doing it before the con and just giving it to the person at the con, or they're doing it in their hotel room at night.
Oh yeah, I got one of my good buddies, this comic creator Carl Altstetter, did a bunch of extreme work back in the day.
Right.
Did a Q Unit and Deity. there's times when we've been hanging out and we'd go to he's my road dog. I usually table with him when we go to conventions together, and like we'd go have a nice dinner, hang out. We're bullshitting for a little while after the show, and then it'll be like 10 o'clock, and I'm exhausted from talking all day. My brain is just fried, and I want to go to bed so I can get up early. And he's like, "Yeah, I gotta go home and finish like 5 commissions. I gotta go back to the hotel and finish 5 commissions." Or if we're sharing a room, he's like, I would bring a sleeping mask because I want to be able to sleep without the light on. I mean, I want to be able to sleep while he's got the light on because he's at the table and he's got to finish. He'll be up till 2 a.m. He taught me the hustle, and I feel ashamed because I can't hustle with him. I can't keep up with that. I got to the point where I'm just like, because I realize if I'm just exhausted at the table the next day, I'm cranky. I genuinely don't want to be there because I just want to be asleep. And I figure it doesn't matter that I'm not a name in comics. If I'm there at the show, I'm there for the comic fans. Doesn't matter whether anyone knows me or I've got like a small number of people that bought my work in a previous year and show up. My job is to be there and be pleasant and engaging, and whether somebody stops on my table or not, or if they just stop and look and then move on, as part of the convention, my job is to make whatever experience I have at my table be a positive one. Like, I look at it like somebody who's just walking through and browsing, and I come in and I show them stuff. I give them something interesting to look at. I give them a postcard to walk away with, and I say, thank you for stopping by and hanging out. Like they're going through, again, the state fair thing. You don't, it's not like you're buying stuff at the state fair except for cotton candy and hot dogs. But people come through and they look at the exhibits and check stuff out, and that's kind of how I feel about, unless there's people that are Western fans or horror fans, like the people who my work actually speaks to as the audience, then we have the longer, deeper conversation, and we get into more stuff. But for the most part, the people who just are just strolling by and checking stuff out the show, I just try to be pleasant, and I can't do that if I have no sleep.
Yeah, it's all about what brings you the most joy, what you think brings the most joy to your fans. Mm-hmm. And I have no problem doing commissions at a convention, but I think I've come to a decision where, like, if I'm going to do that, it would just be limited, like the amount that I do, and just do a couple quality ones if I have the time. If it's crazy, insanely busy, then I'll just have to say, look, I'll get it to you later in a week, or whatever. I just can't do it here; it's too busy. And they understand. I know, like, Amanda has done commissions at conventions. I think she's slowed down doing them at conventions because she'd be insanely crowded by fans and just like not really selling anything because she's totally consumed doing commission work or whatever. And she's always boothing with other popular names in the industry, and so it's just insanity. It's just like it's too much. And fans are understanding. Like if you tell them, hey, I just can't do them here. If you want something from me, I'll be more happy to do it and mail it to you. Not a problem.
Yeah, that is something I did start doing. Was people would I stopped putting out a sign with commission prices, but people would approach me and ask, and I would tell them I can do it and mail it to you. And some people are like, nah, it's okay. Like, some people just want the souvenir sketch at the show, but people that genuinely liked my style and said, I want to see you do this character, but I want to see it in your look. They'd go ahead and just pay for the commission ahead of time, and and just give me their address, and I'd just do the piece, and ship it off to them. But because I don't do that often, I've been lucky enough that I don't have to fall into that thing where I've got people waiting like 3 months, 4 months, a year for their commission. Usually, I would just do it like in the like within 2 weeks of me getting home from that show.
Right.
So
The popular sort of business-minded artist would say, if somebody wants a commission while you're at the convention, just charge them an arm and a leg. Charge them a higher price, and I'll be willing to do it, but here's the price. You want it?
Yeah, well, I think that's the true, and I think that the smart people always say, treat comics business as a business. It's comics, but it's a comics business. But I think that those are also people that have more craft than I currently have, because I'm proud of my work. I'm proud of the books that I have put out, but I genuinely I'm still learning. And there's a lot of stuff where I look at the I think that there's people like you said who they can be in an incredibly crowded situation and they will just put their head down and focus, and they can pound out those sketches no matter how much chaos is going on, because contrary to popular belief, I think that very little of it is talent, and most of it is putting in the years to the drawing board and developing the muscle memory that you can just draw you can draw what's demanded of you as a comic professional.
Right.
It requires you to learn how to draw almost anything and be able to draw it not necessarily from imagination, not without reference, but to be able to look at that reference and then mentally rotate it and say, well, this is what it looks like, but I need to draw from this angle. And developing all those chops and then developing the skill through repetition to be able to do that over and over and over again, then be able to do it over again quickly. It's like, being on deadline versus being at a crowded convention. They're like, either way, there's a lot of noise going on. I gotta draw.
Yeah. Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Yeah. I have done commissions at conventions, and for the most part, it didn't get in the way. You're always like, I would suddenly realize I'm doing a commission and sweating just to get it done so I can not be doing that and focus on the rest of the convention. But, there've been a couple of times where I was at a convention working on a piece of art, and, some reporter shows up, say, mind if I film you? I'm like, yeah, sure, go ahead. It's like, I'm nobody, but...
It's free advertising, man.
Yeah. But yeah, go ahead.
All I was gonna say is everybody is somebody's favorite creator.
Yeah.
So when you say, "Well, you don't need to film me," you're special, because every creator has an audience out there who falls in love with their work. And it doesn't matter what skill level they're at or how long they've been doing it or how big their audience is. Everybody has at least one person who, ideally we want to have 1,000 true fans, and ideally we want to have 5,000 true fans and living like a baller. But even if you're just an indie guy just scraping out and struggling, everybody is somebody's favorite creator.
Yeah. Yeah. I think at the end of the day, we're all worthwhile enough to be here doing this, and kind of like you're saying, if you have a passion to work on a book, work on a comic, there will be fans out there that want to check it out. And it's just a matter of being at the right place at the right time to meet those fans. But
something else as I'm sitting here inking occurred to me that I'm curious. I'm just curious to see what you think. Having spent so many years as an inker, is that I for a long time resisted digital art because my day job is graphic design. I'm in front of a computer a lot, and I just thought I really just want to, be able to sit down with some analog tools and draw, and drawing in ink. And this issue is the first issue that I did my layouts digitally, and the reason for that is because an iPad's a luxury to be able to have, but I had the opportunity to buy a used iPad Pro. So it was one of those things where I was like, all right, I'm not breaking the bank on this. I'll give it a try. It was a deal that I was like, this is so good, I can't pass this up. And then I thought, well, let me use it. I'll use it for doing color work because that way I don't have to lug a laptop around. I can just put my my line art in a piece, do color, or for my art work, gray tones. But once I started getting used to using Procreate, which is one of those digital drawing apps for tablets,
Yeah.
and I really liked it. So I thought, well, let me do my layouts digitally. Because normally my layouts, I usually used to do them on vellum because it would allow me to flip my pages without having a light box. I just flip over the vellum and make my corrections. And drawing digitally, I found that the lure. Part of the reason why I think this issue took so long for me to finish my layouts is it became too easy to go farther drawing the layouts digitally. Because I've always said I don't do pencils, I do layouts because I'm a rough artist. There's no point in me doing tight, finished work. But I found that as I was doing my layouts, I would end up, zooming in and putting a little bit more detail, putting more finish in there than I really needed. And I had to kind of retrain myself to not put that much detail in there because it's kind of a waste of time. I see my friend Jesse's taking off. Jesse, thanks for popping in, hanging out.
Take care.
But what's the thing that I have found in doing these digital layouts is it started becoming so easy that at the point I was like actually drooling, saying, God, I really just want to finish this whole page digitally. And I think that I came into it not as a diehard, I'm never going to work digitally. I came into it like I prefer traditional inking. I could give up the pencils because, my pencils are real rough, but I prefer the digital, doing digital. Yeah, I prefer inking with a brush. Once I learned how to do, I spent so many years learning how to ink with a brush that now that I can do it, I don't want to give it up. But that iPad is very seductive. Inking in Procreate is very seductive. And now I'm thinking, as part of my whole wanting to work quicker, that I'm probably going to try working full digital for a few projects. That doesn't mean that I'm abandoning the brush. What I'll probably do is I'll save pinups and commissions and stuff like that. I'll do with brush and ink just so I can make sure I don't get stiff or lose that muscle memory. But I think I want to see what happens to my comic, my sequential storytelling, if I can just kind of dash through working on it digitally and just, the fact that I could do stuff like, instead of taking my reference photo and having my reference photo next to me to look at, or to having my reference photos next to me or having it under the light box, I can just hold up my iPad, point it at what I want to take reference of, take that reference, and then just drop it into the image, and then lightly trace it, and then go in and sketch in my finer details. It's one of those things where it's seductive, man. It's real seductive.
Yeah, I'm familiar with computers, and I'm, it's like I had an Atari, whatever it was, 2600 or like their first computer back in the 80s, and I played with it. Like the first computer drawing I made was I was copying that popular Frank Miller cover Wolverine with his claws out, his hand
Ah.
claws. That was my first computer drawing on a computer that couldn't really do much, but and now currently I do have a digital tablet, and I've only played around with it a little bit.
Mhm.
Like you, what the majority of I'll probably do is coloring, because I'm interested in coloring stuff. I haven't, I usually fake it. Like I take out an art program and throw down some tones by hand, with the mouse or
Mhm.
whatever. But once I have some free time, I might do stuff specifically with it, with the tablet and the pen. But as far as comic book page inking, I think I'll always do traditional, unless I get a good offer to do otherwise. Because really, like, I'm building my small publishing company based on the fact that I want to ink traditionally over other artists.
Mhm.
And you know, I just can't imagine getting bored inking traditionally. Not that there isn't fun doing the same digitally.
Mhm.
I I see the potential. I see the options. I trust me. I'm a very visual person, and I could see myself playing with these programs and getting into it. Um, but it's like there's only so much time in life,
Mhm.
and there's already enough things I want to do that's going to take more time than I have time, maybe.
Yeah.
um, so it's picking and choosing. It's like I could play every instrument in the band, or I could just choose to do drum solos.
No, I definitely get that. And it's funny because even with Photoshop, being an industry standard in terms of what people use for all manner, whether it's coloring, digital arts. Some people letter in Photoshop, even though I personally find that abominable, and I prefer Illustrator. But one should not shame other people's creative tools if the results speak for
Yeah,
themselves. Um, exactly. In the end, if you can't tell what they use to letter it, then I say shut up. It comes down to the fact that Illustrator is a pain in the ass, and I understand why most creators don't like create. And I don't say creators like comic creators. I say creators like I know graphic designers who hate Illustrator and just like they do everything in Photoshop. Um, but it's one of those programs that once I learned how to really not just learn the program, but I learned how to make it do what I want. I was like, oh my! It became like crack to me. Um,
yeah,
like I spend more of my day job in Illustrator than I do in Photoshop. Um, but that's neither here nor there. I remember the reason why I brought up Photoshop is that for my work, I've got like a large Cintiq, and sometimes I'll have to do some concept sketching on there, and for that it still feels awkward and kind of unwieldy. And part of it's the size of the stylus. Part of it's the fact that I haven't gone through and found the proper ergonomic setup to make it comfortable. But
right.
it was drawing on the iPad that was the big break for me. It wasn't drawing digitally per se, because I've tried drawing digitally multiple times on a large screen and I didn't like it. And what's weird is for me, I have it set up so my drawing table, my traditional drawing table is at an angle, and I actually set my iPad drawing board on top of my drawing desk, and I put like a block underneath that to push up at an even higher angle, so it's not vertical, but it's like I'm when I'm on the iPad, I'm like at a true 45 degrees when I'm working. And that is so much weird that I've realized that ergonomics plays so much of a part in the process. And no one told me that when I started making art as a youngin'. You know, people told me the angle, like, okay, just the fact that you rotate your pages as you're inking. That's something that my buddy Carl told me. But no one before that, like, you know, I hung around tons of people that were like the you know, pro-am and just people that were into art, but no one actually said, here, use your natural arc. No one even talked about the natural arc of the drawing hand. I never had that talked about in any of my drawing classes through high school or college. I went to a fine art program for college, and I definitely learned a lot from that program. But what I learned was mostly about creativity, and very little of it was about the technical aspects of making art. And I've learned there's so much more that I've learned in years later, that a lot of it is just how holding your tools the right way, having your body the right way, you know, having a good chair, because, you know, sitting in a bad chair will wreck your neck and your shoulders. And, you know, I've seen people who had to give up an artistic career because their bodies couldn't do it anymore.
I'm laughing because currently I'm doing everything wrong. I mean, except for twirling my page, but you know, I'm sitting in a folding chair, which is like, you know, and I'm working on like an office desk essentially. Like it's a huge freaking office desk that you got at a local furniture store. So it's flat. It's, you know, it's like I used to work on an art table, and I even have a small one here. I used to work not at a 45-degree angle, but like less of an angle, but still an angle. And I understand the need for it, because, like, okay, so here's a page. This is like the bottom is you know, towards me, and the top is far away. Like, if I was just to go like this, my lines would be crap. That's why, like, I turn the page to me and work like with my face up against it. But yeah, so, like, you know, I almost don't think about that stuff. Like, am I holding it right? Am I doing it, like sweeping my arm, my elbow, whatever, you know, like, because for me that's dangerous. For me, that's when I start, like, you know, I remember when I was younger, and you, like, foolish things pop in your head. It's like I had a random thought, like, how am I breathing? And once that thought popped in my head, it was like, how am I breathing? I'm not breathing. You know, it's like,
you start suffocating.
Like, once I start thinking, like, am I holding the pen right? Am I, you know, that's when my art, you know, suffers. It's like when I start thinking, like, should I be doing it at this angle? Should I be, you know, but, you know, at the same time, I do know, like, a better chair would make the days go by better. You know, like my butt wouldn't be hurting at the end of the day because I'm in a crappy chair. You know, like the last good chair I had, I threw out because the cats just tore it apart.
Well, see, that's a whole nother thing.
Yeah.
I mean, we can get into the cat talk, but for me on the ergonomics, it was the fact that I started having sciatic problems a couple years ago, and it was like one of those things where it got to the point where I'm somebody who, I was an athlete in college. I actually, like, you know, I ran track and field at, like, a, you know, an NCAA school. You know, when I was in high school, I was like state champion in my event, and it's like I went from that to, like, there was one day where I went to work and I couldn't get out of my car, and I had to go home. And my wife had a problem where she had hurt her ankle a while back. We had a cane at home. I had to go back home, get the cane, come back to work, and people were looking at me like, "Oh my God, what happened? Did you get into an accident?" Because they're used to me kind of running up the stairs and bouncing and bubbly and all this, and I was coming up the stairs slowly with the cane because like my hips just locked up so bad, and that's when I was like, I got to start figuring out how to make my body, better. And, I don't have a standing workstation for comics, but my computer graphic design desk is on like a platform that raises and lowers so that I can work. Like, I don't stand all day. What I do is like, I alternate where I'll work half of the day. Like, I'll work for an hour standing, then an hour sitting. Because if you stand all day, that's as bad as sitting all day. So it's like I would just alternate every hour between that. I started doing yoga, getting a nice, for me, it wasn't just, it's a luxury and I want to have a cushy chair. It was, I wanted to preserve my body because I started it's more of cautionary tales. I have looked at other creators who, through various degrees, drove their bodies into the ground, and they literally they started developing nerve damage, and they literally I can't draw anymore, or I have to learn to draw with a different hand. I know I'd heard those stories about George Perez where he had at points where he had to draw on his back and have a drawing board mounted above a bed or a couch so he could work. And I was like, I need to listen and learn from the experience of other people who have gone through that. And the fact that I'm not at that stage yet, I was like, let me start taking better care of my body. So, I mean, that's something that I harp about, and I try to tell younger creators, look, you're not going to feel invincible forever. I enjoy it while it lasts, and the older I get, the more true I see that I believe in that youth is wasted on the young.
Yeah. It's, I have no problem. Like, I'm 57 now.
Mm-hmm.
And it's only recently, like, if I feel a difference in my body, it's like, okay, number one, last couple of years, it's easier for me to gain weight now, as opposed to the rest of my life. Previously, I've been my high school weight for most of my life. And now I'm like technically 20 or 30 pounds overweight, whatever. But if I exercise, it's walking, and I've lessened my walking because I've, like the town I'm in, it's really not that fun to walk around. I mean, I'm from New York. I used to walk around Manhattan all the time. And if I see a difference, it's in the morning. It's when I first get up. It's like stiff. It's like, and that's really the only time I feel the difference. And I consider myself very lucky.
You are, man. Actually, I appreciate that because you look and you speak and you act with the energy of somebody like 15, 20 years younger. So you definitely bring that joy and enthusiasm. It comes across in your work, in your videos. So that's a good thing. You're aging gracefully.
So far.
Knock on wood. Oh, this is the thing I was gonna say. Knowing that you're a cat lover as I am, we only have 2 cats in my house, and it was not like this when we first got them as kittens. We've had them since they're kittens. They're around 5 or 6 now, but I have just noticed an increase over the past year or two in terms of just how much fur there is in my studio. And yes, they shed every summer, and yes, they shed regularly throughout the year. But we vacuum a couple of times a month, and I'll wipe stuff down. But I'm at the point now where, like, my drawing table, it's got one of those trays on the side for art tools, and my tray's filled with. I got tons of markers in there, and I got like little like reference sculpt heads and and little doodads and knickknacks and stuff like that. But it's just there's fur covering everything, like there's just a thin coat of fur everywhere I turn on every surface, and I'm like, when did this happen?
Yeah. I'm not sure if I'm more aware of it lately. I mean, I've had cats previously, but never so more than the last 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it's for me, it's more of a recent challenge than it has been for most of my art career.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, because specifically right now, I'm living in a place where I really don't have a separate studio space.
Mm-hmm.
So when I'm not working, they're all over here. And every time, it's like I am beyond tired of every time I got to wipe down my desk. I got to wipe down the keyboard. I got to wipe down the camera I'm using, and it's like I'm tired just getting to work.
It's like I love these guys, but I'm like, gee, you're killing me. Like there's like literally, if I look over, I've got my jar of water to rinse my brushes, and it's not that there was fur in the water per se. It's just there was fur in the glass jar I use for water because there's fur in everything. So when I put water in it, there's still like a couple of strips. Like sometimes I'll dip my brush out, rinse it, and I go to start drawing, and there'll be like a little cat hair on the brush, and I get like a stray weird line. I'm like, oh crap, what is that?
Yeah, I've come to realize like the best solution is to have a separate studio space, and I do realize that cats want to hang out with you, and I've experienced that. Like, some cats won't put up with it. If you're working alone in your studio, they won't leave you alone, even if they don't have access to the room itself. They'll scratch at the door. They'll crash into the door. They'll meow in the hallway. You gotta find a way around that. Sometimes if you need to, you gotta play with your cat. If you have a cat, you gotta play with your cat beforehand.
Oh yeah, tire them out a little bit so that you can focus and get some work done.
Tire them out, then put food out for them. Like some people keep food out all the time. Just put out food right before you go to work. So if they're hungry, they'll go eat. If they're already tired from playing before and then they ate, more than likely they'll sleep 6 hours. So you're good for a while.
Yeah, you can get a run into some pages. I definitely like they will come up to me and just be like, oh no, it's time for you to take a break and you got to throw my mouse toy for me. It's time. They will just come up and be like, no, we're not leaving you alone. And I just got to move away from the computer. Like the only time is if I'm on like a conference call for work. I'm like, no, you just got to go find something else to do. But generally speaking, they will just be like, no. 2 or 3 times a day, they just demand. They wake up from a dead sleep and they just look at me like, it's playtime.
Yeah. I don't know. It's like I've had pets, but never this consistently. And when they start interfering with my work life, then I start questioning my ability to be a human being. I don't know. It's like it's like, am I really actually letting my cats interrupt my workflow?
Well, But I mean, that comes down to simply the love of having an animal in your life. Because for me, it's not. I have the mental focus to ignore them and work, but I don't have the humanity to ignore them. Like they're literally this little furry thing is just saying, I love you and I want to spend some time with you. And I'm like, I mean, my wife and I, we don't have any kids. And to be honest, I feel like, oh hell, I would get nothing done if we had kids. But cats are pretty needy.
Yeah.
Anyone who tells you that cats,
Yeah.
that they keep to themselves, it's like, nah, you've never lived with a feline, because they very much just want to be in your business 24/7. My wife frequently refers to one of them as my art director, and without
Yeah.
fail, it's if I leave a sketchbook or a pad of newsprint for some figure drawings laying around, I will come back and the art director will be sitting on top of it, like she's judging my work. It's just without fail. It's ridiculous.
I used to take pride in my pages being spotless. Since I've had them around, not so much anymore. It's like, well, I can scan the page then clean it up afterwards.
Mm-hmm. And let me just get this book done.
Yeah. But yeah, it's like I constantly think of like that scene from Shrek with the cat, his eyes growing huge. And it's like, oh, don't you want to love me? Don't you want to spend your time with me? It's
Yes.
like, yeah, I'm a freaking sucker, but at the same time, it's like, if I don't make enough money to feed you this month, then you're out of luck.
Yeah. Well, I mean, for a number of years, I actually did not have any pets because, I grew up with cats and dogs, and I love them both. It's one of those things where I'm more of a cat person than a dog person, but I do love both. And the big reason why, for a number of years in my 20s and 30s, I didn't own any pets was simply because I didn't want to have an animal around and not be able to give them the attention I felt like they deserved. Because at that point, I knew I was just going to go to work, come home, put my nose to the drawing board, and try to make some comics. And now, I mean, part of it actually is like that. The cats will. If I'm busy, the cats will go bug my wife. If my wife's busy, the cats will come bug me. And it also really does genuinely make me say there are certain times of the day where I do need to take a break. So I'm living a little bit more of a balanced life. But for the longest time, it was just that fact of not being able to be present for them that kept me from having any pets around.
Yeah. I mean, you could balance it just like having kids, and they don't need 24/7 supervision.
Exactly. That's easier than being a parent.
You need to give them some attention, and you need to feed them, and you need to make sure that they're not going to die of anything they swallow or some disease or whatever. But other than that, they do take care of themselves. They do play amongst themselves, and they are freaking cute and adorable.
Yes, having adorable things living in your house is definitely a plus. It's a benefit. So, comics wise or book wise, do you find time to read much stuff at all these days?
I find I have to force myself a lot. I've read between, I would say I probably began reading in the late 60s into probably the early 2000s, but I would say like the majority of books I've read were between the 60s and the 90s. Which is why that's what influences me. I've definitely read comics since 2000, but less and less. My life has changed many a time. I've moved a bit, and situation has changed. Right now, specifically, I'm not in a town that has a comic shop. So my access to comics is what I pick up through crowdfunders.
Mm-hmm.
And I just have a stack I haven't read, to be totally honest. Um, you know, I I am a victim of sparkly things, and that tends to be more. Um, I I'm really taking on and doing too much, and it's like, um, how much time do I spend online? But it's also how much time do I really like have and to be productive, and just need to trim down what I'm doing, um, which is why I'm like glad for the possibility of working on a novel. It's like I could picture myself working, like writing 4 hours in the morning would be prime time writing time,
Mm-hmm.
and then spending the rest of the time on my own comic work. And if that's all I do, then I'll get a lot more done.
That sounds like a nice balance. Like I've been trying to tell myself, one of the big problems I've had, not problems, but just I'd say a lack of poor planning or a lack of planning is that for the most part, the way I've worked is I have ideas about what I want to write next, floating in the background and back of my head. As pieces of the plot fall together, or scenes or dialogue fall together, I'll just throw them in a Google Doc and just let it build. And then when I'm done with whatever project I'm working on, I start writing the next comic. And I've realized that I'm doing myself a disservice in the same way that I keep myself always loose with drawing, and I always try to draw every day, if not working on a comic page, at least to like sit down and grab an art book like a George Bridgman or Andrew Loomis and just do some studies or do some sketches. I try to at least draw a little bit
Right.
every day. That I really need to train myself to be in the discipline of writing every day if I want to be a creator who both writes and draws their own work, because I
Yeah.
feel like having that muscle built up means I won't sit down and be like, oh wait, this plot isn't working, I need to go back and rework it, and then I'm spending like 3 months writing, and I'm just in the meantime I'm not doing sequential pages, but I'm just drawing other stuff to keep me busy while I'm writing. Whereas if I just sit down and I get myself into the habit of writing for 20 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day, what have you, then I just keep working on building that muscle and moving the story along. And when I have that thing finished, like, I don't want to necessarily say full script, but if I have it to the point that it's written out, not that I would hand it off to someone else, but I could hand it off to someone else, or it's ready for me to start drawing. If I had to draw the entire thing, I could do it from start to finish. Like I've got the dialogue worked out, all the beats, my rough panel breakdowns, because I do like to break down my panels on the page. Like, I mean, I just try to give myself a shot list. That's rather what I'd say. I don't necessarily do
Right.
I don't really compose the page in writing, so I don't really write full script in that sense. What I do is I give myself a very detailed outline, almost like a bullet point outline, but with sub bullets, breaking the outline into actual, here's what's happening on the page, here's what's happening, this is how many panels are here, here's the dialogue for it, here's some interesting details that I want to make sure are in this panel because they'll pay off later. And being able to be in the point of just having that written, and when I finish a project, I set that aside and I just move on to writing the next thing. But I keep that time locked where I've got a discipline for writing the same way I have a discipline for drawing. Right now,
Yeah.
I make sure I draw every day, but I'm undisciplined in my writing. And what I want to do is have a writing discipline and an art discipline. And it may mean that, yeah, I get a half hour less of drawing time done per day, which for me, that may mean that could be half of my entire creative time for a day sometimes.
Right.
But I feel like in the long run, it will help speed me up in that there won't be those gaps, long gaps between projects. And I'm not going to start that until I finish this issue that I'm working on now, because this issue I'm working on now, this series has taken me so long, and I ended up making this last issue, almost double sized.
Right.
And so I'm like, I need to put this project to bed not as quickly as possible because people are clamoring for it. But I just feel like you kind of want to clear the decks so that you can start fresh, and then going forward, I can just say, all right, I'm not going to be producing comics as quickly as I was before. Or actually, I think in the end, it'll end up being about the same pace. The difference will be, as opposed to I'm focusing on doing a bunch of prints and pinups for a few months, then I'm focusing on making a comic for a few months, then I'm focusing on writing for a few months. It'll be probably the same amount pace in terms of the content I'm producing, but it'll just be every day I draw a little bit of comics, and then draw a little bit of artwork just to improve and work on my craft, and then write a little bit. And just, it'll be a slow trickle, and just try to build up that muscle, get faster, get better at all of it. Because in the end, I think very few people, I think, get into comics or drawing in general thinking, oh, I'm going to be... Some people do get in thinking they're going to be awesome, and then they get, reality kicks them in the butt. But the people who stick with making art, I think, stick with it because there is no endpoint where you've mastered it. The downside is you're never completely satisfied with your work, but if you can learn not to let that self-criticism be toxic, if you can eliminate the toxicity from it and look at it as, oh, wow, I'm never going to be bored ever again in my entire life. That's the positive way of looking at it. That you're on an adventure that's going to last you until you die. The sad part is I've got more adventure in me than I have lifetimes to live. Like I would love to have, I would love to be Alter Carbon style. I've got maybe 9 sleeves lined up like a cat. I can have 9 different lives, and each life will have a bunch of comics I make on the side and one magnum opus.
Yep.
I mean, if everyone should be so lucky as to produce one piece of seminal work. I mean, when you look at guys like Frank Miller and Alan Moore, and how they've got these multiple projects that change the industry, it's hard. That's magic. And
I want to jump in right here. Like, I don't know with Alan Moore, but I know Frank Miller. Like, he began his career seriously when he was on Daredevil, and that was month after month after month of grinding it out and loosening out his style to the point where he could pull off a monthly, on a regular basis. Because initially, his art looked like a lot like Gil Kane initially, and it was very tight, very accurate, and it became looser and more. I can't think of a word, but
kind of cartoony, a little bit impressionistic.
Yeah.
More expressionistic than impressionistic.
Yeah. So it became more about telling a visually appealing comic book story rather than putting everything he had into every page and every panel. So I think this has been true and is still true. Like, comic book artists are the best artists. They don't just put everything on the page. They're capable of a lot more than what you see in the comics.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, and that's one of the things that when I see real quick, I want to give a shout out. I see my sister-in-law Holly is in the chat. She says you're such an inspiration. It's nice to listen to you explain how you keep up the discipline of drawing and writing. It's so true. Sometimes it can be discouraging. So thanks for telling it like it is. She also she does art, as well. She draws and she paints, and I always try to share tips with her, or just anytime that I can give her a pick me up or some encouragement, I like to do that.
Right.
Let me see. Hell, now I forgot what I was going to say. But just the fact that that ongoing discipline and putting
Yeah.
in the work, that is something that I've often felt, and this wasn't something I've realized until probably the past decade, that to a certain degree, I'm starting to feel that to one sense I've done myself a disservice by not putting time in the mainstream market, because the fact that I never have had to crank out monthly pages, like even now, I don't feel like I have the chops. If you put me on any book, and even if it was something that was like, hey, look, no one really cares. It's just it's a third rate tie-in to some series that isn't even like a big blockbuster series. Just crank the pages out. Um, I have such a respect for the quality of draftsmanship that goes into comics. I'm like, the reason why I feel like I am proud of the pages that I put out is because I'm taking the time to make them the best I can with each page. But like you said, Frank Miller, he loosened up and he learned how to do it. He learned how to do it hitting deadlines. I've never had the deadline grind, and I think that while I probably would have a bunch of ugly work at the beginning, most creators say that they really cringe at their early mainstream work, and that it's putting in the time, the repetition, and building up the pages. And it's also something that, occasionally when you see in forums, or just hearing people talking, like sometimes you hear people. I don't want to talk negatively of fanboys, because I am a fanboy, and fanboys are the bread and butter of comics. Without
Yep.
fanboys, we're not making comics. But sometimes when I hear people bitching about the quality of work in a particular comic, I think about a quote, and I want to attribute it to Tim Seeley, but I don't know if it's him. But I remember hearing a comic creator years ago in an interview in a podcast saying that they wish that when they drew, that blood would run from their eyes, so people could just see the blood, sweat, and tears that go into the page. Because even a book that you may look at and you don't think it's a very good comic, just making a comic on my own made me see how hard every single page is. And most comic fans are just like, they love comics because they're like, dude, I could never do that. They appreciate comic creators who are just like, yeah, that it's really hard. And they're like, yeah, we love that. I don't have a single drawing bone in my body. But when I hear people criticizing comic art, I'm like, whatever you consider is the worst comic in your world, somebody killed themselves to make that book. And they did it month in and month out. And you don't know what the deadlines are. You don't know whether they got the script late. You don't know whether the penciler took too long, so the inker got the short shrift on picking it up. You don't know whether the colorist had to color the entire book over like 2 or 3 nights, or in one day. I've definitely heard of colorists finishing a book in one day, and I look at that and it just makes my brain melt. And you don't know whether the entire creative team was on point, but editorial came in and said, look, for one reason or another, we have to change this issue. It conflicts with another tie-in, or there's some edicts, or we're getting some blowback, or some comments from upstairs, or retailers are up in arms about something. And for some reason, you have to change like half of the issue, or redo like the last 8 pages right before it has to go to press. Like, all kinds of reasons why a book may not end up being like the masterpiece, like a Jeff Darrow masterpiece.
Yeah.
So many things that go into it.
It's usually everything working against the average comic being a masterpiece.
Mm-hmm.
And it's and it's a lot of fans. It's not even criticism. It's purely opinion,
Mm-hmm.
which is a lot different.
Yeah.
And it's something to look at. Look at a piece of work, whether it be a comic or it be a film or it be whatever, and have an opinion without knowing what went into it.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, if you really think about it, you could figure out exactly what goes into anything. But
Yeah.
you're not the one sitting there day after day, night after night, sweating over pages. So
Mm-hmm.
you're not invested at all. You're just looking at imperfections, or what you perceive as imperfections, or like missed opportunities or whatever. Um, it's like you only have one shot at this at the end of the day. It's like, you make a page, you finish it, you move on to the next one, and
Mm-hmm.
so on and so on and so on until the book's done. It's like, I was briefly, in all my career, I was briefly only on a monthly schedule when I was working on Aquaman. And
Mm-hmm.
let me tell you, it's a freaking grind.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I look forward to that on one of my own books. It's like, to have that opportunity is the greatest thing for anyone,
Mm-hmm.
and it's easy to, having done it, it's easy to go to Marvel or DC and get work, and just, and work for them, and get a check on time that's dependable, and yada yada. Um, but it's another thing entirely to sort of build that yourself, and work out the kinks, and have enough income coming in, and have the business rolling along, and to be the everyman or every woman behind it all, that a lot of these independent creators do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and anybody who bitches about their writing or their artwork within those comics doesn't see the whole picture. They just see what's in front of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, now when I look at a book, if there's something that seems off to me, my first wondering is the problem solving of, I wonder what happened. Like, I don't assume that somebody is a bad creator. I assume that something disrupted. And yeah, like you said, there's opinions. Sometimes there are people who maybe aren't the best, but for the most part, just to get to perform at that level of working at a mainstream publisher, you got to be pretty damn good already on all
Yeah.
cylinders. For all of the people that work in mainstream comics. So it's like, I don't even read that many mainstream comics anymore, but they still have my utmost respect. I mean, for me, it's less about me not being interested, and then more of it that, like you, I've read so many comics for so many years that my
Yeah.
tastes, more often than not, what I'm reading is older work that I never got to read before. Like I mentioned, the Milton Caniff thing. Like I was reading a collection of Steve Canyon because I'd always heard, Milton Caniff, spoken of in very highly regarded tomes, like up there with like Alex Toth and I've heard people speak of him right up there with like with Kirby and Eisner. So I was
Yeah.
like, let me really. He's somebody who I happened to be in a used bookstore. I saw a Steve Canyon collection, and I was like, well, hey, here's the time to check him out.
I will say, something, like, during my time at Valiant, where I was just inking backgrounds. This is work before, like I worked at Marvel and DC. Um, I worked over the pencils of an artist. I would say is really, um, the most I had experience I had of working with somebody like before my time, and that was
Mhm.
this artist Stan Drake.
Oh
I'm not sure.
wow. I know him by name. I couldn't pick out his style mentally right now, but I definitely know his name.
And he was one of those old timers who doing comic strips before my time, and you know, he was penciling Eternal Warrior for them back in the day. And just looking at his pencils, he was one of the few ones that didn't work in the Valiant offices, and it was set up where, you know, the pencilers, the inkers, the colorists, the letterers, production, writers, editors were all in the office 9 to 5, and
Bullpen style.
yeah, like unlike any other comic publisher, because Marvel doesn't do that, DC doesn't do that, you know. Anyway, so I would only see his pencils. I only met him once, and that was at, you know, Valiant party. But just seeing his pencils and seeing his craft, and he had a very old school line to his work, and his textures and his line weights. It was freaking inspiring. And you know, I mean, I would have loved to work side by side with him, but I probably would have been, you know, shell shocked and not got any work done. But so it's probably good that he was a distance away. But yeah, his work was phenomenal. But at the same time, like, you know, like, you look at the finished comic and you don't really get to appreciate it in its full glory. You know, there is something that happens, like, you know, a comic page is 11 by 17, but it's shrunk, you know, to a portion of that. Then it's inked, and you know, it's colored. It's letters are thrown over it, and there's something lost. But, you know, I mean, we creators all know that going in. We try to make it look the best we can, like for those still working traditionally on the page, anticipating the you know, the colors coloring the huge crowd that you did in the background one color, and and the spacecraft, you know, just like drowning it in bizarre colors or whatever the case may be. But it's all fun.
Oh yeah. I remember years ago now, there was an art exhibition out here in Los Angeles. It's actually in a town just north of Los Angeles called Northridge. They had an art exhibition of Jack Kirby originals. And it was like, it wasn't a massive art gallery, but it was a good-sized art gallery. And they had like just tons of original Kirby work. They had, like, I think a couple of issues of Commandy, like full, like one full issue with maybe a couple of pages break in between, and then several other pages, just, you know, the full originals. They had some of his romance comic pages up there. They had some of the Fantastic Four issues where he was starting to do the experimental collage work, which I've only seen that reprinted in black and white in the Marvel Essentials. I haven't even seen the color version of that. So what I saw in the versions I'd seen didn't really represent his work that great. And when I saw those originals, and it's true of most creators, when you see, like you said, when you see the original art compared to what's reduced in the page, you're like, oh wow, this is amazing.
Yeah.
But there's like one splash page for me, it was either a romance comic or a crime comic, where it was like a double page spread of like a bunch of kids running through the streets, and it was like a tenement, like Brooklyn tenement. So you see like the you know, the line, the wash going across the street in the line in the middle, and the old time cars going through. And this piece, I'm looking at just this one double page spread, and it's drawn oversized. So I think it might be like, you know, 16 by 20 or 18 by 24. Each page of it, and I'm like, this is like Michelangelo.
Yeah.
You know, and I mean, and a lot of the stuff, how, you know how there's two types of Kirby. There's two types of Kirby fans. There's the people who come to Kirby immediately and recognize his genius, and then there's the people who don't like his work and how rough it looks in the beginning, and then they come to see the genius later in life. I'm the latter, in that I didn't really start appreciating Kirby until I was in my 20s, going back and reading some stuff. But when I saw the originals at this show, and this was maybe a decade, it was less than a decade ago, but it was maybe around 10 years ago. And when I saw that, I saw just how much a lot of the early Kirby work that I saw as a kid and a teenager was a victim of bad reproduction. And I'm not just talking about like when you get cheap comic books printed. I'm talking about these are reprints, but maybe they're reprints that were shot from I don't know, like not from like the original reproduction art, because the reproductions just did not have the quality that you would expect a trade paperback to have. Compared to when you saw the original pages of that same thing, you're like, the line work is so much more delicate. And I mean, yeah, a lot of that is also, you know, Joe Simon and their inking, or, you know, the various inkers he's worked with. But the fact that what saw print of Kirby's work a lot of times just was nowhere near as beautiful as what he put down on the page. And I have to imagine that, you know, Kirby's sort of the type of guy who didn't mull on the downsides. Like, yeah, stuff sucked, and there was a lot of places where he got a raw deal, but he was a soldier, and he kept making it, and he's like, he'll call out bullshit when he sees bullshit, but he's not going to be a crybaby about it. It's like, stuff sucks, move on, keep moving. But I have to imagine that compared to what seeing his original art compared to what ended up in print, I'm like, that's gotta suck to a certain degree.
Well, I imagine somebody like Kirby doesn't have time to look at his own books. That's
true. He's putting out so many of them.
He at one point was drawing 5 pages a day during his peak period.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm sure he was always like doing more than the average pencil you've ever heard of. You know, like he's freaking amazing for all his quirkiness to his work and faults. Like later in his career, he wasn't as sharp, you know, art wise, but there's a charm to it all. And like you said, I mean, you know, he was a bricklayer, and he put in the work regardless. You know, I mean, that's the kind of upbringing he comes from. Demanded that, and I envy that, because, like, you know, I wish I had his discipline. You know, like most modern artists, I feel like I freak out too much. You know, like, why am I worried about the details of this or that other thing or whatever? I should be just working on my craft every day, doing finished work, and not worry about all the other noise.
yeah. We're getting pulled in so many different directions, and that goes back to what you were saying about, like, just not paying much attention to social media. There's so many things in the modern life that are just distractions. That, you know, and honestly, the fact of, like, even TV, like now, like, I rarely used to watch TV at all. But now, just in terms of, like, wanting to make sure I spend a little bit of family time with my wife, you know, we'll spend a little time watching some TV every night. And it is that thing where I've learned that if I want to have a happy marriage, I need to be able to step away from the drawing table. And the person who was always working on comics in the back of their mind, I'm kind of shifting out of that into when I'm at the drawing table. If there's something that really occurs to me that I need to remember or I need to sketch, then I'll do it real quick. But I'm kind of forcing myself to not just be completely, you know, immersed the way I used to be. But like you said, back in the day, that's how Kirby was putting food on the table. And if he was at the drawing table for 10, 12 hours, he was at the table for 10, 12 hours. At least there was food on the dinner table.
Yeah.
And it's hard in this modern day where we're both encouraged to have that high demand work ethic, but then also I think that we're both encouraged to be more balanced, and we see how sometimes, how negatively it can impact your life not being balanced. So it's sort of weird for me I'm trying to find a way to balance being imbalanced, if that makes any sense.
No, I mean, there's a reason. Like, Batman isn't my favorite hero at DC Comics, but I relate to him. Over at Marvel, my favorite is Iron Man. And what do the two have in common? Not that they're rich, but they're
Work
obsessive.
ethic. Yes.
And I'm obsessive, and I don't mind being imbalanced as a person, for all the good that does me. But it's like I want to do quality comic book artwork, but eventually I want to also have like a certain amount of art. I don't know, like my goals change, like with the what's going on around me as well. But I've always said, like, when I get old, which is like when I can't do comics anymore, then I'll get into painting. Like my next art career will be in painting. But yeah, it's like, I want to do more than I'll ever be able to.
Yes.
But what's realistic is I want to do the best I can at what I am doing.
No, I definitely completely agree with you there. And I don't want to make it sound like I'm saying being obsessive is a negative. It's more the fact that in order to continue my life without having it fall apart, I've been forced to develop a level of balance. There's part of me that does wish I could throw myself just obsessively into the making comics and continue to be there. And there's points in my life where I have, but I've also sort of paid the price for it to some degree. And I see we got a new viewer here. I see Kelly is in the chat. She says, "I just got here and I'm new to this. This is my first stream." Well, welcome, Kelly. We are two comic creators here. I'm an indie creator, and Peter is a veteran comic book creator and indie creator, and we're just working on our respective books here and just talking about art and creativity and life and talking shop. If you have any questions about art, feel free to ask. But we're just hanging out and making stuff. By the way, I was going to ask you, how are you on time? Because I know that you were streaming beforehand, and we've already been going for 2 hours. So
yeah, I thought your normal stream is an hour, so I was expecting.
I went long because I figured you were already working beforehand, so I thought, let's let you just continue your flow and keep working.
Yeah, this has definitely been great, but yeah, I guess we should think about ending it soon, I guess. But this, it's always great hanging out with you and talking shop with you. We've done it plenty of times already, and I look forward to just continuing that history. It's the things we struggle with aren't the weight of the world, but we just want to be better at what we do, and that to me is just like that dedicated worker trying to do a better job at his what he does for a living. Then he goes home and spends time with his family.
Right there. It's, you know what? That's what you said. It's the solid work ethic and always trying to be better. It's like this Batman Tony Stark, Peter Palmiotti.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
let's see. Kelly asks, my question is, can a comic be stuff who are real and not real? As in, can comics be nonfiction as well as fiction? And yeah, there's lots of great comic books that are, most of them are about fantasy. There's a lot of great stuff like John Lewis, Joe Sacco does a lot of great comic book journalism and a wide variety of nonfiction. There's people who do comic book cookbooks. They're out there in tons of stuff that's about real world. So it's not just about fantasy, and there's books that can be a mix of two. Autobiography that has some sort of dreamlike fantasy elements. I think the beautiful thing about comic books, and I'm sure Peter will agree with this, is the fact that you can do literally anything. That there's no boundaries on it. You know, TV requires so much to get a TV show or a movie made. But when you're sitting down, it's just you and a pen and a paper, and whatever you're able to imagine is what that story can be. So, and I apologize that you're coming at the end of the live stream, Kelly, but I want to invite you to subscribe. There's links to Peter's channel in the description for this video. And you can definitely hit the subscribe button on my channel. I'm going to have another live stream on Sunday. And Peter's, trying to live stream daily, so you'll definitely get more of him this week. Not necessarily every day, because I don't want to speak for you, but he's going to definitely have some more streams coming where he's going to have guests on and talk with his creative process and continue to talk with them. So thank you for coming in. And I'm sorry you're catching it at the end, but I invite you not just to watch the replay of this video, but definitely please come back for future videos. I'd love to be able to answer more of your questions anytime you're on talking, and I'm sure Peter will be happy to share any of his knowledge experience making comics too. So on that note, Peter, is there anything you want to share, anything you want to direct people to, or want them to check out?
Yeah, I mean, go to my channel and subscribe to my channel. I'm trying to grow it. I want to be a part of the YouTube partnership. Every little stream of income is important to us on comic creators, independent creators, and I got a Patreon, which you could also support me there. I haven't done much. I plan to, but much like all my plans, it defaults to work I actually have to do. But and also I also have a PayPal .me/Peter Palmiotti if you just want to throw me a tip to buy me a cup of coffee or whatever. But yeah, I'm across the web: Facebook, Twitter, Instagram are my main beats, as well as YouTube.
Awesome. Thank you again for coming on, hanging out, and staying on for extra long stream. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. You're fun, you're inspiring, and I love just getting into the process and just, again, shop talk, just hanging out with someone in the studio and drawing and chat. This is great. Thank you so much. For viewers, yes, thank you. For viewers, again, you can subscribe to my Patreon. You'll get a bonus live stream. I do 3 public ones once a month, and I do a Patreon exclusive live stream once a month. We're usually doing an art book study group where we sit down and analyze some of the best art books out there and try to suck the knowledge dry out of it like a mosquito. If you want to see what I'm posting on Instagram, Twitter, Tumblr, the social medias, you can follow me on all those platforms. Or you can sign up for my newsletter, and I send out a newsletter once a month with links to some of my best posts, links to these live streams in case you've missed them, any new artwork that I have out to promote, new items for sale, new books and artwork. And if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my comics, or if you read digitally on Amazon Kindle or Comixology, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. That's GERIMI.net. That will forward you to my Amazon author page. So again, everybody, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it. That's it for now. Go be creative.